Hi, everyone. My name is Celine Figueroa, and I am a program specialist with the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. We are so very, very grateful for you all tonight. The Denver Museum of Nature and Science is pleased to partner with the International Institute for Indigenous Resource Management and the Denver American Indian Commission to present Indigenous film. To begin tonight's program, I will hand things off to Jean Rubin. Jean is the director of Indigenous Film and Art Festival. Welcome, Jean.
Thank you, Celine. Welcome, everyone, to the 17th Annual Indigenous Film and Arts Festival. This is the second in our series of festival programs. The festival is presented by the International Institute for Indigenous Resource Management, and with me is Merv Tano, our Institute president. Merv will be moderating the conversation with our guests tonight. So the Denver Museum of Nature and Science has been hosting our in-theater programs for many years, and we really are appreciative that they are able to provide this platform so we can continue the festival as an online virtual event. And of course, we could not bring the festival to you without the support of our many community partners and sponsors. You saw their logos scrolling as you logged in. I'd like to acknowledge some of our major sponsors. We are supported this year by the National Endowment for the Arts, Arts in Society, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Colorado Creative Industries, Konica Minolta, AARP, and the Consulate General of Canada in Denver. We also have support from the many community partners that you saw on the screen who provide our venues, this year our virtual venues, and also help get the word out to various communities in and around Denver, and I guess this year in and around the world. So this is where I usually pause because everybody in the theater applauds the sponsors and community partners. If you feel inclined to applaud, you can type your appreciation into the chat room. We have an impressive group of folks with us tonight. I'm just going to briefly introduce everybody, ask folks to give us a wave. Robert Davidson, you can see folks in the thumbnails. Reg Davidson, Hoturua Kerr. After the films, Merv will start a conversation with our guests. You'll have a little more time to hear about them. And you'll also have an opportunity to type your questions into the chat room. So let me tell you what we're doing tonight. We have a lineup of 4 short films that all reflect this year's theme of places of memory. Our first film is called SKWOD, How I Lost My Indian Name, from director Terry Jones. This is a really interesting experimental film. Terry uses a split screen, and you'll see his eye blinks that trigger each of his editing cuts. And one of the things I like about this film is it demonstrates that even a dresser drawer can be a place of memory. I also want to let you know we're working with Terry to organize an entire program of his short films that will be part of our ongoing monthly Indigenous film series in 2021. And we'll have Terry join us for a Zoom discussion. So stay tuned to my emails or to the DMNS communications you get for more information on that. Our next film is Now is the Time, from director Christopher Auchter. This was made to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the raising of a totem pole in the village of Massett on Haida Gwaii. This was the first pole raised in over 100 years. The 2 carvers of the pole that you'll see in the film, Robert and Reg Davidson, are here with us tonight. So they will speak to a whole range of issues, from the fact that the potlatch had been outlawed in Massett, to their inspiration and journey to carve the pole, and all the support they got from family and friends in the community.
And higher powers.
And higher powers. Third is Hehekenga Tuhura. This is the story of Sir Hector Busby. At age 86, just weeks before his passing, he sat down with his nephew, Alan George, who made this film, and talked to his nephew about his legacy of celestial navigation and waka, or canoe carving. Tohuroa, who's joining us for the discussion, is likewise a wayfinder from Aotearoa, skilled in the art and science of traditional navigation. The final film in our lineup is Skate Break from director Peter Thomas, who gives us a skateboard tour of murals in downtown Winnipeg. And this film reminds us that, in fact, we are always creating places of memory.
So some of the folks that still have got their mics muted, so they could unmute it, that would be great. I was wondering if we could start with Hotoroa, and then to Robert and then Reg. Kind of a brief update of what you all been doing lately.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm over here in Aotearoa. Since we've had this big COVID-19 lockdown and isolation stuff in New Zealand, we had planned this year to be sailing around Te Waiponama, which is the South Island of New Zealand, and take two of our voyaging canoes down there and do lots of programs with schools and coastal communities that people haven't really accessed before and haven't really had, for maybe hundreds of years, the experience of an old style voyaging canoe sailing into their bays and stuff. So that's what we were going to do, but that didn't happen. So we've been pretty much locked down in my ancestral home, where we have a harbor, and it's where my ancestors actually came in and settled. And so we've just been running local school programs. Our kids have been coming down, and we've been taking them sailing now this has to happen when we're in level 1 or 2 of our lockdown kind of status in the country, but we've been doing that. And at the moment, while I'm talking to you guys, some of my crew are out today taking kids sailing and doing programs in 3 or 4 different schools in our region. So we're kind of busy, and we just sort of really just still working on trying to open up this kind of knowledge and this kind of these kinds of experiences back to more especially our kids, but any young people that are interested. But first and foremost, it's trying to get our kids to understand that the stuff that we do and the stuff that we've done shouldn't be relegated to a realm of myth and legend, but actual stuff that our ancestors did. And so, we get out there, take them out, and when they come out with us, there's this huge shift in what they have been told and then what they experience when they come and do so with us. Because, at the end of the day, and you would have seen it in Hector's little video there, that, when we were young, when I was a young boy, we were consistently told that our ancestors got here by accident, that they never were able to navigate to one place and go back or any of that kind of stuff. So, we grew up having to listen to people tell us that, oh, you only here because your ancestor got lost when they went out fishing, or they got lost when they were going on a canoe trip to a different island. But, people don't go on a fishing trip with their family and with maybe a pig and trees and other things to plant and stuff like that. So, yeah, those are the things that we're working on now to try and change what's being told to our kids. So we're just doing it in a less expansive way at the moment because we're stuck here, but we'll just keep doing it.
All right, thank you. Robert?
Yeah, I'm still carving totem poles. Actually, I just finished a 22-foot one for a private commission. The idea of the totem pole was, or the story behind it is, we're beyond being silenced. I carved a totem pole before then called "We Were Once Silenced," and I'm more involved in painting, making statements on, for example, every year the Sam come back. I can't remember what it's more a statement or questions, more questions. What will be left for our grandchildren? Like I feel we're in a dire situation globally with climate change, and it seems like the powers that be are not heeding the warning, and so I kind of wonder, what can I do to help change the direction? And so I'm asking questions for people to think about.
All right. Thank you. Brother Reg.
I live here on Haida Gwaii, Massett, and I just acquired 3 logs, red cedar logs, and I got 1 log I dropped off at a mill where they're going to mill some boards so I can make some box drums. I want to make some box drums for our dance groups, but also I'm just starting a commission on an 8-foot pole, but I also have 2 other red cedar logs, one 38 feet and one 20 foot. I'd like to work on. The 20-footer I'll be working on the same time I work on the 8-footer. So that's in the works right now, and what I'm doing on it's not public knowledge, so I'll stop now. Thanks.
Okay. One of the things that what was important was that there was Papa Mao. Papa Mao was there. And in the same way he spent some time with you, he spent some time with Pinky Thompson's son, Nainoa. That's the thing, when you get old, you know the fathers. Right, Nainoa. So, in a sense, it was like a blessing, you want to call it that. There was that repository of knowledge that was so generous and willing to teach folks. And some of the folks were kind of hard students to teach, because when you think of the initial voyage of the Hokulea, there was not all kumbaya, right? So how did, and in the same way, see, Reg and Robert, you guys you carried on that carving tradition. Back home, and home is Hawaii, we lost both the navigation, the canoe building, and also the carving tradition, because of the introduction of Christianity, and then also the destruction of our forests. What's the role of a navigator, a canoe maker, a carver in you kind of alluded to it, Robert. Protecting these valuable treasures, as taonga, that are in our forests, or what used to be our forests. So can we start with Otoroa?
Yeah, sure. Hector's right when he says that Mo was a blessing, because he was one of the last remaining people in the whole of the Pacific who had this knowledge. And we've been challenged a few times by people who say, oh, you guys are Polynesians, but how come you wanted to learn, or you've taken on board this Micronesian navigational knowledge? And when I spoke to Mo about this, he just said to me, oh, his answer actually was, oh, the white man drew the line.
Yes.
And so what actually happened was that what he was telling me in his own way was that, at the end of the day, the knowledge that was used right around the Pacific for navigation wasn't necessarily Micronesian or Melanesian or Polynesian, but it was Pacific Ocean knowledge. And so he was always he was happy that we wanted to listen to him and learn the things that he had to teach. And I have to say, we're very lucky, because he really broke the cultural mold of his people by teaching people who were not of his family, because the knowledge that he had was specifically knowledge that was handed down from grandfather to grandson and so on. But he was in a bit of a position where a lot of people, and it was through things like the pressures of Christianity and stuff that made holding on to navigational icons and carvings and things like that a bad thing. And so in many ways, navigational knowledge had to be held secretly, because there's the overzealousness of recent converts to Christianity and all those things made it their job to get rid of this kind of stuff. So, for him, breaking that mold and then bringing us into that world of learning and understanding was a big step for him. And then for us, it was a big gift for us to be given. And so in terms of as a role, I guess, of a canoe builder, of a navigator, of an ocean traveler and things like that, is firstly to make sure that we do these things to make sure people's gifts like Mo are never, ever lost or wasted. There was a one chance that we had to accept what he had to give us, and we did that. And Hector was very much a big part of getting him to New Zealand, and then us who had those opportunities to spend time with him after that were very, very fortunate. So, and stepping back in terms of some of the things that I've always been told from when I was when I was a kid, was that, some of the important things for us to do is when you're in a role of like a navigator, a canoe builder, or a carver, is the whole idea of how you look after your people. So, and so, you can look after your people by making sure that there's always a house there for them to stay in. You've always got food and those kinds of things for them as well. But you also need to look after them in terms of bringing the cultural treasures of your people back into their sight, into their hands, into their thinking, into their everyday world, so that they understand who they are and where they come from and where they might be going to. Because one of the things that we've found here with a lot of our young people is that they've had a tendency to believe that the things that don't belong to them are theirs. And so by what I'm saying is that it's taken maybe, from over my lifetime and probably the lifetime of my parents has been a time where there's been a slow but steady shift in the thinking of our people back to the understanding that actually the things that belong to us, the things that belong to our ancestors, and the knowledge and the traditions of those times actually are worth something. And so our job in terms of looking after our people is to be able to bring those things back to the forefront again and make those things their original point of reference, and to accept that kind of stuff instead of saying things like, well, according to my legends or according to the myths of my people, they can actually stand up and say, my grandparents said this and I believe this. So when I'm sailing and I'm out in the middle of the ocean, sometimes when I need a bit of space for myself, and some of my crew will say to me, oh, where are you going? And I say, oh, I'm going to talk to my ancestors. But really, I'll walk up to the front of the canoe and I'll sit there and I'll look around. And it's really a one-way conversation in many ways, because I sit back and I sit down and I think of all the things that all my ancestors told me, not just in what my grandparents and my grand uncles and aunties told me, but all the things that they told me that they learned and heard from all their stories of the past. And then that becomes my baseline starting point of information. And so trying to get that to happen amongst all of our young people, I think, well, actually all our communities, doesn't even have to be young people, just all the people who are connected to me, my land, my oceans, and my ancestors, to understand all that stuff so that they know who they are. They're no longer lost in terms of identity.
Thank you. Reg?
Where I'm living, I live at home in the village here. In the way when Robert started doing the totem pole, I never ever seen any songs and dances. It's almost, just listening to him speak, it's almost that we all went through the same thing, where an example is our Nani means grandmother in our language. And when Nani was teaching us the song and dances, it wasn't her right to teach us because he wasn't the same clan as us. But because so when you're listening to him speak, everywhere in the Pacific, it's the same idea. It belonged to people. And the lady that was supposed to teach us, she didn't want to teach us, so our grandmother taught us. And so, and today, the way all our songs are sung, it's shared universal with the other Haida villages. There's exceptions where there's some people that are composing it, and one guy was sharing his songs, and then he decided he didn't want to share it anymore. So he asked everybody to quit singing his songs. So and there's a fine, we're also in a fine line where so much of our knowledge is disappearing rapidly. And I think there might be one or two people here that speak our language fluently, and the rest is being taught in the school now, but it doesn't sound the same. It's totally, well, we're English speaking people now, so I'm sure when you speak Haida, it's you have it's spoken different because it's not the first language. Because when we're kids, when we're learning Haida, it was the first language. So I'm sure we have an accent now when we speak Haida. If someone that's fluent in Haida, they'd say we'd have an accent. And so a lot of the big thing is, I mean, like Robert talked about it on the video, where that was our turning point. But when you look at it 20, 30 years later, then you realize that, but at the time, all he wanted was for the elders to celebrate one more time. Because the very first time I seen Haida dancing was, my grandmother was the treasurer for the women's auxiliary in the Anglican church, and they wanted to do a fundraiser. And so all the elders had Haida songs and dancing in the community hall. Everybody went and watched, and that's how they did a fundraiser. So the first time I ever seen singing and dancing, it was serving no purpose except to fundraise. Opposed to when they raised the pole, they were celebrating and singing songs for that occasion. So
Thank you. Robert?
When I committed to carving the totem pole, Nani and Chini were very supportive. Chini was 89 years old then, and Nani would have been 74. And the people leading up to the actual pole raising, Nani and Chini hosted the elders in the village to come together, and they all talked in Haida, and I wasn't brought up speaking Haida because of, like Nani said, she didn't want us to go through through the same thing they went through in being ridiculed about speaking Haida, so they only talked to us in English. Anyway, all the stories, the history was talked in Haida, and I would sit next to one of my uncles and he would interpret for me. So when all these elders came together, that formulated the how they were going to conduct the day of the pole raising. And the totem pole became a catalyst. It became a visual, and it inspired the elders to, after the meetings, the elders would sing, and it's like they became alive. It was such a joy to watch them. They're all in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and it was just an enlightening experience. I remember Reg and I worked pretty long hours to carve the pole. It was we did about 10, 12 hours a day for 6 days a week. And a lot of times I questioned, I said, why am I doing this? And then I finally, the answer came to me, I'll find out when the pole is being raised. But I didn't really get the lesson until about 10 years later. And it was the knowledge that we gained with the elders could not have happened without a totem pole raising. We needed a reason for all that the sharing of the knowledge with each other. I remember a friend of mine, he said his father and this other elder, they would tuju kawang, they'd go do a walk-in visit. And in that walk-in visit, they would talk about their knowledge, and they would verify that information with each other. And I felt the totem pole did that for the elders.
Oh, thanks.
Should we take some questions? We have three people in the audience have asked questions related to the building of totem poles, so I'm just gonna read all of them. First is, how long did it take to build the totem pole in 1969? Next, have there been other totem poles raised since then in Massett? Has there been any pushback for the cultural practices since then? And also, for Robert and Reg, have you carved any totems or created other art that specifically addresses climate change?
Okay, the totem pole, it took us 3.5 months.
Oh.
6 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day. And you have to remember too, Reg never carved before. So to just pick up the adze and start chopping away, I thought that was pretty remarkable. The Reg can talk about his totem poles that he carved in the village. There has been a lot of totem poles since then in Massett and Skidegate, raised over the years. Reg?
When our father became chief, he commissioned me to do a totem pole. Because he's the way it works here, we have to marry the opposite clan. We can't marry the same person in our clan. And we're a matrilineal society, so we follow our mother. So when my dad was becoming chief, he commissioned me to do a pole for him. And that when the day he was going to raise it, it was blowing 60 miles an hour. Our grandmother was asking him not to raise it, but he raised it anyway. And I also did another pole for the school, our school in the village here. And it was just to commemorate the opening of the school. But our father, when he raised the pole, he was the first chief of our generation to raise a pole when he became chief. Because in the old days, if you look at all the old pictures, there's massive totem poles everywhere. Every household had at the minimum of one pole. So, thanks.
Some questions. Some questions for Hotorua. I lost track. Wait a second. Somebody wants to know how you self-identify, if it's as Maori or as a member of a specific tribal community. And then we have a question about whether the Maori knowledge of celestial navigation has been committed to writing or video.
Yep. So the for the first question, I guess on an international level, I identify as Maori. But interesting enough, in Aotearoa, the word Maori means natural or normal. So, you know, it was a term that we ended up using to differentiate between us guys who are the normal guys who lived here, and then everybody else who turned up. But before that happened, each sort of tribal group identified through one of their tribal names, which was a name derived from one of your ancestors. So where I live, I live over on the coast, and just to let you guys know, I explained to Gina and Merv earlier, I'm sitting in my car because a tree fell down and knocked all the power lines out in our little town. There's about 400 of us who live there, so I had to drive out of town and then park somewhere so that I could get a little bit of service I could hook into our little talk today. But so over there where I stay, that's where all my dad, my grandmother, all their ancestors all settled and grew up there. So I identify there by my connection to my dad's tribe. So I'd say I'm Ngati Mahuta. So what that means is I'm a descendant of my ancestor by the name of Mahuta. So if I'm talking to other tribal groups around in New Zealand, I'll use that as my way of identifying who I am. And then sometimes I'll also use the name of my ancestral canoe that brought my ancestors to this land as a way of identifying myself too. Now, for the second question, since we've been doing all this stuff in the recovery and the relearning of the navigational knowledge of our, of the Pacific, lots of information around interviews with Hector, interviews with a couple of my other navigator friends from New Zealand have been made into small documentaries. Lots of people have come and talked to us about how we do stuff, and quite a lot of people have written their masters and doctoral theses around what we do. So in that sense, there's a lot more information around than there was before. But really, I guess it's because people are still trying to get their heads around the type of knowledge that it encompasses, which is meteorological, knowledge about the weather, knowledge about the stars, knowledge about the ocean and all that kind of stuff. No one's actually sort of written a book about what we've done over the last, say, 20 years to catalog and itemize all the different things that we've done, other than people who've just shown interest to write about it in their research. And I've been okay with that, because a lot of those ones who've done that, they're actually ones who've come and done work with me, and they've sat with me, and they've done journeys with me. So it's been great that they've taken the time and energy to document the stuff that we've been doing. And so I guess at the end of the day, what it is that I think we're in a place where we'll have a lot of the theoretical stuff gathered, but at the end of the day, you still need to go and do it. It's the same as like with Robert and Reg. People can look at pictures all they want, and there could be a book saying this is how you do it, but until you actually do it and you keep practicing it, that's the only way you get better at it. And that's the only way that you can actually teach people, by taking them with you and doing that. So it was great to hear how, when Reg was 14, going there to do this totem pole, because it's the kind of stuff that I do. I drag my grandson around with me. He's 8. I drag him everywhere, not just sailing, but when I have to go and speak at tribal events and that, I drag him along with me, and I sit him beside me, and I'd say to him, listen to this stuff, because one day there's a high likelihood you're going to have to do this kind of stuff. And and I have to say, he doesn't complain a lot for a little guy. He sits quietly. He can sit for hours with me listening to stuff, and I'm really happy for him. I'm happy for me that he's happy to come along and do stuff. And pretty much that's what happened to me when I got dragged around everywhere by my dad and the elders of our tribe. So I'm lucky in many ways.
More question?
No.
Okay. I got a question. It's about the places. We did a lot of work with folks up in the Arctic, and there's a tendency for when people who are not from a place to be talking about the vast, empty, trackless ice and snow, or the vast Pacific, and yet for those who navigate those places, their names, specific names for certain places, and those names are kind of mnemonic devices, because they tell you that you can get berries there, or watch out for bears there. Is that also true in the ocean? For example, when different waters come together.
Yeah, when we're out there, we certainly do have, there's certain places where we expect to see certain stuff. So for instance, you know, in our stories, that there's certain places where we expect like two converging currents to be. There's certain places where we'll expect certain types of weather. There's certain places where we would expect to see, say, certain types of dolphins, certain types of whales, certain types of birds, those kinds of things. And when you're moving, one of the things for us is keeping in mind, you know, how far we've estimated we've gone, how long we've been sailing, and what we need to be looking out for. So just as and actually I talked about this earlier today, just some young people I was talking about, was we did a journey about 8 or 9 years ago now. I was sailing up through, there's a small island just north of Tahiti, and we were sailing up to the Marquesas. And I had said to our gang, we'd been sailing about 5.5 days, and I'd been up most of the time because there's lots of reefs and islands through this place that we were going. But I did say to them, look, sometime in the late afternoon today, there should be a rock that comes up to our right, and I'm going to have a rest. But if that comes up, yell out to me, because then we need to we just change course here and we go for another day, and we'll see the island we want to see. And, you know, sure enough, by about sort of 4 p.m., one of the crewmen comes up to me and says, I think that we can see that rock. And it was in the middle of nowhere, but, you know, we saw it as good. Now, we'll start moving towards this other direction now. If we sail for about a day and a bit, we'll be just about right up, we'll almost be ready to land on the island that we were heading for. And it worked, but it's just knowing and remembering all those things. You know, another example of that was when we were sailing towards Hawaii, and I had a young man on board it was actually his test to be given the title of navigator. He had to navigate us from Nukuhiva to Hawaii. And so we were cruising along for a bit, and then we'd hit this part of the ocean where, you know, he kept asking me, have we hit the doldrums yet? And I kept saying to him, what did I tell you that Mo told me? And he said, oh, well, when we get there, there'll be a certain type of dolphin that we'll see. And I said, so have we seen it yet? And he goes, no. And I said, well, don't worry, because when we're there, they'll turn up, you know. And sure enough, about a day later, this huge pod of dolphins, black dolphins, just swam like right across the front of our canoe. And I said, there you go. You know, we don't need to look at a GPS or call anybody on the radio to find out where we are. He told us what would come and tell us when we're in that place. It's here now. So we're good. Are you happy? And the great thing about because a few things like that happened right through the voyage. And by the end, by the time we got to Hawaii, about a day out of Hawaii, and I said to him, "What did you learn from this?" And his response to me was, "Oh, that our ancestors will never let us down." I said, "Yeah, perfect. That's the best thing you could have learned from this whole trip. I'm happy." And yeah, and he's just moved on from there. It was great, and it was a great revelation for him to know that those words spoken over hundreds of years were still helpful for him in that time when he was being tested.
Are there any new questions? Thank
Yeah.
you.
Reg is the fisherman.
How about you, Reg?
You're mute.
You're-
You gotta unmute. There you go.
It's so exciting listening that you can still navigate, just because when I first started, it was all landmarks. Like it was being phased out and GPS was showing up, and maybe about 2 or 3 fishermen today can fish by landmarks. One of my friends, he always talks about when we're setting for halibut, he said, you have to go line up. An example is there's a point there and then there's the island further down. He said, yep, we will go out until that island shows up and then we'll set there, and then it lines up with Toe Hill. That's where all the halibut will be. And then there was another example when I was going fishing. My dad said, all you do is run for that point for 20 minutes and drop the gear. He said, just aim right for that point. And we had about 30 halibut in that one area. A lot of when I'm fishing, there's certain holes. There's another place. See, on Haida Gwaii, before contact, everything, the names were of what you can get there.
Yeah,
And then when contact showed up, they started naming it after people. They
right.
never named anything after people. It was only what you can get at that area. That's what the area was called. And so when I'm fishing every year, there's certain spots a certain time of year that you can get that fish in that area. Because we're our island, all the fish are coming down the coast, and every fish that's going down towards Washington State and Oregon and BC, they go past our island. So it's a pretty high salmon because they head down the west side. So when we're fishing sockeye, they're actually going down to the Fraser River, Vancouver area, and a couple other areas halfway up the coast. So the fish we're catching aren't ours, they're passing by.
I have one story. When I went with Chinny jigging for halibut, he was so confident. He had a 14-foot dinghy, and there were 2 sets of oars. I was pulling and he was pushing his oars, and as blind as he was, he always looked, like what Rich said, he was always looking at the landmarks. And when things lined up, he said, okay, we're gonna anchor here. And one time, it was flat calm, and then all of a sudden there was big swells coming in. And Chinny said, it's gonna blow northwest tomorrow. And the waves came in before the wind started to blow. That's my story.
So, how we fix for time?
We have about 8 minutes.
8 minutes?
Maybe.
Yeah,
If
that was a
anybody-
good story.
Yeah.
That was a good story. Those are the good stories, because those are the stories that all those old guys can tell us about stuff that they've watched through their whole lifetime. You know, that a lot of us who've stepped away and then come back to it are only just starting to see the value of those kinds of things. I remember sitting at the beach one time, and we were just watching these crabs, and these crabs come out of the little holes in the mud and started piling up sand in one place. And then Mo said, "Oh, careful, tomorrow there's going to be big wind," and he was telling us, and it was all based on how these crabs were piling the sand up in the mud on the shore. And there wasn't big piles, but just enough to that. And I said, "Well, why are they doing that?" He said, "Oh, that covers the hole, protects it from the wind that's coming in, that's going to be blowing through tomorrow," and stuff like that. I just saw a question pop up about do birds, or is bird law a part of navigation? And yeah, it sure is, because you actually need to know different types of birds. And see, what's actually happening here in New Zealand at the moment is that we have these birds called godwits. I don't know what they call them up your guys' way, but they actually leave New Zealand in March and they fly up to Alaska. And then they hang out there in Alaska, then they've just started flying home. And so those are the kind of birds in terms of navigation that we watch out for. So if we're looking at what time of year is the best time for us to move, so if we're sailing, if we wanted to sail up into the Pacific from New Zealand, we'll hang around to see when those birds start to move, because they're going to move when the weather's going to be pretty good, when the wind and everything is right to move them in that direction. And so we'll watch when they're ready to go, we'll start getting ready to move as well. And so often, that's just one example of the many different kinds of birds that we'll use. And then once we're out on the ocean, from about 120 miles out from land, we'll start seeing different kinds of birds. That's going to tell us what kind of, that we're getting close to land. So there could be, there's different birds we know, different species that fly certain distances from land. They'll come out to fish, and they'll fly out in the morning, catch fish, and in the evening they'll take off and fly home again. So what we do when we're out there, while we've been estimating our distance for the journey, we know that after X amount of days that we're out there, we should start seeing these birds start popping up. And then once we see those birds, we kind of we look at them and we watch them all day, see what they're doing, and then see which direction they fly towards when it's getting late in the day, when it's getting towards dusk. And we go, okay, it's maybe 100 miles to land, and then we'll sail a little bit further, and then we'll find birds that can only fly about 50 to 60 miles offshore. And then we keep following those signs, and then it gets to a point where we can see the land in, and we're about 30 miles offshore. We can start seeing real good signs. So that's how birds play into the stuff that we do as well.
All righty.
I know about one bird, wheat. It's Swinson thrush. And our story is when wheat sings its song and other salmon berries ripen. And they only show up when the salmon berries are ripening. And after the salmon berry season is done, you don't hear them anymore.
Okay. So we are coming to the end of our program. Celine, did you want to say anything from DMNS?
As always, we are incredibly grateful for everybody who has joined us and for such a fantastic program with such amazing panelists with such amazing stories. We have, virtual hand claps. So I'm going to go ahead and drop a link here for anybody who enjoyed this. We do have our next film on December 9th, where we will also be streaming, and that's Run, Red, Walk, and I cannot say that together, back to back to back. But I'm going to go ahead and link that in the chat for anybody who's interested. Registration is open for that. But other than that, Jean, I'll let you wrap things up. Any final?
Yeah, Celine, can you put up our website again? The Institute website? For folks that have been coming to our in-theater events for years, you know, we move to a different venue every evening, and we're doing the same thing with our virtual festival. So on November 11th, the University of Denver is hosting a program, and on November 18th, History Colorado is hosting a program, and then on December 9th, we're back at DMNS. So if you want to get information about the 2 November programs, we are posting that information on our website. If you are, that's the iirm.org. If you are getting my emails, then you'll automatically get that information. So
Fantastic.
thank you all for coming.
And thank you for the just fabulous conversation from the Reg and Robert and Oturoa. So
we couldn't.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It was great. And Robert, Reg, if you guys can, I think Gina and them got my email. If you guys ever come to Aotearoa, get in touch, and I can take you to meet some of my cousins that are carvers. We can go out sailing and do, spend some time together. It'd be great.
Come pick us up.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, thank you for having us.
Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so
Thank you.
much.